Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Greg, the single guy, and Matt, the family guy. We're recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you. Kent, would you like to introduce our episode today, or should I do that?
Do you want me? I've never introduced an episode before.
Well,
Today, what's the name of our podcast again? International Teachers Podcast, ITP.
See, I have.
Why don't you do
it? Here. Moment of seriousness here. Okay, and I'm going to watch the time. We do have another interview in an hour, so we need to. We're going to keep track of the time and keep it under an hour for you, Lindsay. Okay. All right. Welcome everybody to our episode. I think you're going to totally enjoy this. First of all, I do have a co-host today, and it's not Matt, the family guy. It is Kent, the cat guy. Say hi, Kent.
Hi, Kent.
He said, hi, Kent. Good job. And I'm Greg, the single guy, and we're coming to you with International Teacher Podcast today with our guest all the way from Budapest, and this is Lindsay. How are you doing, Lindsay?
I'm good. Thanks for having me.
Kent, what do you think? Isn't this going to be exciting today? Have you ever been to Budapest, Kent?
I have been to Budapest. I went to capital Budapest, and I went to a little resort town called Eger.
Yeah.
You look at me, you know, I'm a big bath guy. I like the fountains and I like the spas and all those things. And I could spend days doing that.
Well, he likes to talk really fast. This is about Lindsay, though, Kent. It's not about you. Lindsay, can you start us off with a little bit of history of how you got into international teaching?
Yeah. So I've been teaching internationally since 2010. And I think the way I got into it was probably I started out teaching English with a TEFL certificate in Florence, Italy. And then from there, I was in Sardinia and not making any money, really was very poor, saving my cash in an envelope. And I had heard there was an international school in Florence, but I knew you needed to be properly certified and all that. So I kind of thought to myself, well, what if I get this certification and then I can, do this thing properly. And so I ended up, as I was living in Sardinia, in this little town, I applied to Teach for America, which was a 2-year teaching program. And I ended up getting sent to New York City, which was a dream, really where I wanted to go. And then it was hard to leave after only 2 years. So I ended up staying there 5 years. And then kind of what really pushed me to finally go abroad and teach was I did a summer trip to Syria and Lebanon to study some Arabic. And I just completely fell in love with Beirut. And I knew there were 2 international schools there. And so I just went straight home, started researching the job fairs. And by January, I had my job in Beirut.
And which job fair did you go to that time? Because that's one of my favorite questions.
Yeah, I went to the search job fair.
Can you tell us which city that search was in?
Cambridge.
Cambridge, okay.
Yeah,
that's one of the big 3. And I do have to can I plug my book?
You certainly may.
Yeah. Lindsay, I published a book and it's called Finding the Right Fit. And everybody can find it on Amazon and other places. But I'm going to send you a copy just because you're one of our listeners. And you're not just a listener, you're now a guest. So I'm going to send you a copy of my book. It's all about recruiting fairs and in general. But I mentioned search as one of the top 3. The big 3 for the US, because we have search and UNI and ISS, and they all have their databases and everything. And it's just partial to my heart. I love doing recruiting. I love talking about it. I love going to the job fairs. I've probably been to 6. So I wrote a book to help people when they get to the fair, because, I'm sure your first job fair is amazing. It's a roller coaster of emotion, right? Stop me if I'm wrong here, but it was crazy. What do I do next? Right?
Yeah, I would have liked to have your book probably for that, but I did sort of couple together a bunch of different articles that I found online and blog posts and all kinds of things. So I did kind of feel very prepared for what the whole situation was going to be. But I think maybe for people who didn't know about doing all that research ahead of time, they could have all been done in just the one book probably.
Awesome. Yeah. And that's what I want to do is I just wanted to reach out. And if anybody reads that book and wants to improve it and make comments and reviews and stuff, I love that. Actually, if I send you one, you can make a review for me, write it. And we'll go from there. But it's not about me. I just had to plug my book for the first time. And Search is awesome. And where did you end up with Search then? You ended up in Budapest, right?
That was in Beirut.
Beirut.
And
Oh,
that
like
was
I
my
said.
that was my top choice of where I wanted to go.
I do have a question about that, Lindsay. So you go to college and you study, I believe you study Italian, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And you spent time in Italy. You went to Florence and you went to Sardinia. And what made you, you mentioned that you had this sort of leap. You visited Syria. I'm guessing kind of before kind of the unrest in Syria. You visited Beirut. That's quite a jump from sort of your love of the Italian language, your love of Italy, to ending up in the Middle East. I was wondering if you could just say a few words about kind of what kind of prompted you to do that.
Yeah, so that's a little story as well. And it also does kind of connect to studying Italian, because when I lived in Florence, I lived there twice. So for 2 years total, I studied abroad twice in the same city. I met a lot of Arab people. There's a lot of Arabs who live there, especially who live in the market, the leather market. I ended up working with them one summer in the leather market. But I just had a lot of Arab friends, particularly Lebanese and Jordanian. And so I just started reading all kinds of books about the Middle East and, Arabs and just everything. And my very last semester of undergrad at Arizona State, I was sort of waiting to see my counselor to kind of plan my last semester of study. And there was a little poster outside her office that said Arabic 101, and it happened to fit into my schedule. I was like 4 credits over, but I was like, I could take this class and start to know what all my friends are talking about when I'm with them, in the room and they're just going off. So I took that class and then just kept it going. I took a class there. I took a class when I lived in New York. I took one at a community college, and I kind of cobbled together all these different courses. And then I was convinced by one of my Jordanian friends. I originally wanted to go to Yemen to study, because a friend of mine who studied Arabic, I know you guys have talked about Yemen. That's where she went to study Arabic. And she said, that's kind of like the best place to learn. And it's the closest to modern standard Arabic. So she had really recommended going there. And then my Jordanian friend was like, no, you should really go to Syria. That's going to be the best place for you. So I was like, all right, I'll do that. I've been wanting to go to Beirut. I'll combine it kind of with a trip. So my plan was to go to Syria for 2 months and just study Arabic. And I was like, and I'll take, a little side trip to Beirut. Well, right in the second week of being in Syria and Damascus, I took my little side trip to Beirut, and I fell in love, and I was like, Syria is amazing, but Beirut is where I have to be. So I ended up 1 month in Syria, 1 month in Beirut.
So follow-up question. So Lindsay, your friends and family, when you say to them, hey, I'm heading off to Beirut to teach, what was their reaction? Was it, that sounds like Lindsay. Yeah, that sounds like something she would do. Or was it, what? Why Beirut?
Yeah, I mean, they're kind of used to me at this point. So there is that initial like, what? And then there's a lot of me, convincing them like, it's not like you see on the news. It's not this or that. And to be honest, my parents aren't super worldly or knowledgeable about other countries in the world anyways. So they, like, if I just kind of like reassure them a little bit, they can kind of be like, okay, yeah, we don't actually know anything about what we're talking about. So I guess you know more than we do. We trust you.
Just one more question. So you say that your family wasn't like a big worldly family. When did you think, hey, you know what, I'm a little bit different. I'm interested in this big wide world. When did that kind of occur to you?
So my aunt studied abroad in Florence when I was born. She was there at the time. She's like 20 years older than me. And she told me, like, ever since she came back from Florence, I think, I just remember her always saying, when you turn 16, I'm going to take you to Italy. And she told me that my whole life. When I turned 16, actually, we made it my 17th birthday. She did take me. I met a lot of people who had studied abroad. I loved Italy, and it just kind of went from there. I met people who were studying abroad, and I think it was, probably that connection with my aunt.
Do I get to go now with a question or something?
Yes.
No, I just want to make a comment. I spent a lot of time in Italy because I was in Switzerland as a teacher, and I would go down to Italy all the time because I was in the, anyway, long story, but I love Italian. And I have this short little story. Can I tell you a story about Italy? And
Sure.
it's really funny because my friends Matt and Stacy, who you've heard, Matt's our co-host. Matt, the family guy, and Stacy, his wife, went to Italy. They said that there's this word I need to know when I go to Italy, and it's shitamato. And it's something you hear in the subway all the time. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to Italy and I'm going to say shitamato. I don't know what it means, and I'm going to find out what it means. But I tell you what, I got to Italy, and there's nobody says this word, and all the Italian. You're looking at me like I'm absolutely nuts too. Well, it turns out it sounded on the subway. There's like uscita, right? Is like exit and get off,
Yeah.
and somewhere in there it sounds like shitamato. So we're in the subway, Matt and Stacy and I've got my phone up by the by the speaker in the subway car, waiting for shitamato to come out. It never did. So we have this funny phrase every time I see Matt. I'm like, "Hey, shitamato." He's like, "Shitamato." It's not even that funny, I guess, but I had to share
I was like,
because
wow, I don't
love
know
Italy.
that word.
No, it's not a word. It's not even in the language. It's funny. I know you're a language person. Kent's a language person. I'm a language person. I love overseas because of language opportunities. You learned Arabic. You learned Italian. Have you learned
Hungarian.
Hungarian? Thank you, Kent. Have you learned Hungarian at all while you were there?
No, and this is, as a language teacher, one of the things that I feel quite guilty about, but I had the best intentions of learning. I started a bit of classes before I moved here. To be honest, like people discouraged me from the minute I got here, like, why are you going to do that? It's too hard. You'll never learn it. My coach at the gym was German. I don't know why I had this impression that Germans were really good with languages. I don't know if that's true, but he was like, oh no, I've been here 3 years. It's impossible. Like, don't even try. So that kind of discouraged me. And then to be honest, like I found out I don't really like it that much. I don't know why, just like kind of the sound. And
in all fairness, it is difficult. As language learners, it's the Hungarian and Finnish are in their own family, right? And they're at like level 4 for learning. As far as difficulty, which is way off the rails, and it's not easy to do. In our case, at our current school, which we don't really talk about much, but in my current case right now, I don't get a lot of opportunities to speak Arabic because a lot of the people are from other countries, and English is what brings us together. So, like other international schools, and I'm sure your school in Budapest is the same way, the lingua franca is English. And outside of there, you might have opportunities, but it depends on the people that you're around. And I guess we don't learn a lot of Arabic here as imports, as expats. Because,
you don't need it as much.
Yeah, you don't need it. And that's one of those misinformation things before we learn about international schools is we think, well, I have to learn another language. I only know English. I want to go overseas, but that's what we do. Right. And I know a lot of people here that don't even speak another language besides English. Right. Yeah. There's Americans here, right, Kent? There's Americans and Canadians that only speak English. Right. Except for maybe some Spanish from high school or something. But,
so what I did just to make myself feel a little bit better was to kind of like double down on the 2 languages that I have been working on. So starting from November, just before we had, COVID lockdown, I started working with a Palestinian teacher on this website that I love and highly recommend for anybody who wants to practice languages, called iTalki. And so I found her as an amazing teacher, and we met like once a week, sometimes twice a week. And we were just, conversing. And so she was my best Arabic teacher I've ever had. I learned so much with her. And then I also started doing some more Italian, not as lessons, but just to have somebody to converse with. And then since I've been here, I've also done some summer school things in Italy. Like I would go for a month. I did once and did an Italian course, or I'll go and do like a week-long thing. So to make myself feel better, I've been like, well, it's not that I don't study languages, just I'm focusing on the 2 that I have already. So
I do the same thing. And Kent's learning Japanese right now, and we're nowhere near Japan. Okay. I don't know. He's like learning tennis online. He's learning flute, and he's also learning Japanese. And I'm wow, that's fantastic. But now I know something about you that the listeners may not know. And what language are you going to study next?
I don't know if I'm going to study this language, but hopefully I'll at least get an introduction. This is my last year in Budapest. I've been here 8 years now, and I am soon on my way to Bangkok, Thailand. And
Did you like my segue? Wasn't that nice? I let you announce it. Oh, I'm getting better at this. No, I'm so excited for you. And do you know which school you're going to, or do you want to say it yet?
Yes.
Okay.
I'll say it. I'm going to NIST. So that was my top choice of location and school. So I couldn't be happier.
And how did you get recruited for that? Did you reach out to them and do it over email? Because there's not a lot of face-to-face this year.
Yeah. So I got my resume together over the summer and little online website. Don't know if anybody looked at that, but I got that ready. And then I just started, I registered with Search again. So I had their database to look at. And I just started applying to only schools that I was really, really keenly interested in. And I think I ended up applying to 14, had interviews with a couple. The very first school that I interviewed with actually this season was at the end of September. And that was ISB in Bangkok. And that was another place that I was also very keen to work. Didn't get that, interviewed with several other schools over the next couple months. And then just before Christmas break, after I'd already given my resignation, so it was a little bit like, oh, okay, I'm really doing this now. I gave my resignation. 3 schools that I was quite interested in popped up. So I'm like, okay, at least, things I'm still excited about are out there. And then this job for NIST came up. It was in my division that I'm used to working in. And so I applied, and I think they were trying to get stuff done before the Christmas break, because they scheduled like some back-to-back interviews. And I found out very quickly that I got the job, and I found out the morning of the last day of school before Christmas break. So it was a
congratulations.
Pretty good feeling.
Question for you. You were forced to resign from your current position before you were able to get another job. What was that like for you? You've been there for 8 years. You have established your lifestyle, your friends and people around you. And then you decided, okay, I'm going to turn this in. I don't know what I'm doing. What was that like for you? And what was plan B and C and D for you at that point?
Kent, that's really harsh to say that she was forced to resign.
Oh, did I say
right? That? He said that, didn't he, Lindsay?
Did I say forced?
No, because she forced to resign is sort of a misnomer, right?
Oh, no. You're right. No, what I meant is that she hit the deadline.
Yeah,
for
let
when
her
the
explain
school.
That. Yeah. Let her explain that. How does that work? Because our listeners need to know more about how international schools work on a timeline, which is much different than the States, right? So can you tell us that?
Yeah, our contract due date was around the end of November. So kind of the dream, I guess, especially from what I've seen in my colleagues in the last couple of years, is being able to find like that perfect fit job before you even give your resignations. Then like, okay, I know where I'm going. I can happily tell everybody I'm leaving, and I know where I'm going. And it kind of almost happened for me with a different school, but didn't. And so I did kind of debate a little bit, like, should I just wait until next year? But then I thought to myself, it's already been 8 years. If I don't turn in my resignation now, I'm just going to be kind of waiting a whole year until I can start over and try again. And even then, it could still happen that I have to give my resignation without a job in hand. So I was like, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to turn it in. That's why I said when I saw 3 more jobs that I was really interested in after I gave my resignation, I kind of had a little bit of a sigh of relief. But obviously, like, the plan B was to keep applying independently and go to the job fair. Greg, I'm kind of like you. I really like the job fair. Of the 2 that I've been to have just been like exciting. I like meeting people, like the rush, and I'm an introvert, so you would think maybe I wouldn't like it so much, but I just really do. But now, those 2 times that I did go to the job fair, I didn't have this situation where I would resign first. So the first time I was teaching in New York City, so there's no deadline like international schools. And the second time I was on kind of like a little hiatus in the US for a year. So I didn't have a job that I was leaving. So this was the first time I was going to have to make that decision. So on the one hand, I'm looking forward to someday going to a job fair again. But on the other hand, if I can just always get a job, in the early fall, why wouldn't I want that? So
that's a really good point. And I think that our listeners need to understand is that, and you can attest to this too, Lindsay, when you first go to a job fair, and Kent, you also, when you first go to a job fair, you don't have international teaching experience. And the international teaching experience is a big, it's a real positive part of a resume at those international job fairs. If you already have taught overseas, that's in a whole different category. You're in a small percentage, maybe 10% of the big 3 job fairs have returned. Well, not all of the job fairs, but in general, right? The one in Bangkok for search and for ISS is a lot of international people go to that one that are already overseas. But a lot of the ones in the States are made up of like 90% of the candidates are not overseas experienced already. So for you going to a job fair now with so much job fair experience, you may not have to, because like you said, and like you got this job, you can reach out to people you know. All right. Let's take a moment break for a little contact information. We'll be back in 5 seconds.
If you want to give us a little shout out and reach out, you can find us on Gmail at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, complaints can be addressed to Greg, the single guy. And we are also on Instagram, ITP Expats. You can find us
your network overseas is exponential when you get to a school and teach for a little bit. You see other teachers come and go.
I think the last 2 jobs I got, like, so this one that I'm about to go to and the one I'm in now, I think connections did help me. So the head of my school in Beirut, we met up at that job fair. You know, we were able to chat. And for some reason, I think I missed the fact that the school I'm at now, American International School Budapest, had a posting that fit my credentials. I think I just kind of just didn't notice for some reason. And he was like, hey, have you thought about working in Budapest? It's like, I was the head of that school a long time ago. It's a really great school. You should consider it. No, I don't think they have a job for me. And then I looked again and they did. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And then because he knew the principal there, he kind of like was able to give me some in-person recommendations. So I think that helped. And then now the school that I'm going to, the head of my current school is the head of the school that I am going to. And so he was able to say, hey, this resume is going to come across your desk, like have a look at it. So I think that helped me in both cases.
At those job fairs, the recruiters, the heads of school that are there recruiting, they're a bunch of chatty hens. They talk to each other. It's a small group, just like we all talk to each other as candidates. Those recruiters are trying to put these big puzzles together. So they're talking to each other. Hey, I found this person. I met this person in the elevator. I heard about this person. I've got an art teacher for you. I've got someone in language for you. I've got this. And it happens. It's amazing that once you get into this international circuit and you go to a job fair, if you're still on good terms with your head of school, they're recruiting for you. And they'll be like, hey, I'll talk to him. You know, I had a head of school that's like, Greg, I just talked to this other great head of school. If you're interested, it's a way in. I told him you'd talk to him. Please give him a call. At least, you know, think about it. And they were talking behind my back at the job fair. I saw him on the escalator going the other direction. He's like, did you talk to him? I'm like, yeah, I did. Hey, we passed each other. So they're on your side.
In the job fair, everybody's
and you're helping with your former school to fill up, because other people are asking you about Budapest, and you're like, hey, I'll tell you what, let's go have a cup of coffee.
Yeah,
I'll tell you about
Beirut to my people.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's amazing. That's one of those things about job fairs that you can't really, it's one of those positives that people don't know about until they've been to one and experienced it. I love the fact you brought that up. One other thing before I turn it over to Kent, when you are on good terms with your school, it depends on the international school, but a lot of times you can even work it out with a school unless they're very rigid. Like it sounds like Budapest was very rigid with their deadline. Like you need to make a decision. Are you coming back next year or not? And they can ask you anywhere.
Small extensions. Yeah. We were able to make some.
They might ask you in October, November, and you may or may not have to answer. I remember a school asked me, and I said, listen, I would really like to come back next year, but I'm scheduled to go to a job fair. Can I wait till at least after the job fair to give you that answer? And it was one of the February 1st or 2nd. And the school agreed. They said, because I was transparent with my current leaders. And I said, listen, I'm going. And I'll even, if you want me to find somebody or get some contacts for you of people to fill my position, I'll even do that. But give me an extension. And they might agree with that if you're open with your bosses, right?
I think in Beirut, obviously that was my first international school that I got that job all by myself with no connections. We talk about like going to the presentations of the school and everything. And like I mentioned before, I had just spent a month in Beirut, and that was the only place that I really wanted to go. It was my first choice. Like, so I went to the presentation and was kind of like adding in some things to what the presenters were saying about Beirut. And then when I had the interview, I just spent most of the interview just like gushing about Beirut because I just loved it so much. And I think that's kind of, I would say that's probably why I got the job, because I would imagine for most people, they're trying to convince them that they can go to Beirut, that it's safe. Like maybe they don't know anything about it, so they're trying to talk up the good parts, but I was telling them everything that was so good about it. And so in my mind, I'm sure that it was like, oh, well, we have to take this person because, she loves it. She wants to be there. She's not going to, disappear after a year or whatever. So I think in that case, like me talking up the school kind of helped me to get the job, I guess.
Lindsay, it's been nearly a decade since you were the new kid at the school. What are your feelings about going to a new place, not starting over, because of course you have all your experience as an educator and all of your life skills. What's this going to be like for you? What are your feelings going into a new city, a new school? Even though you've done this a few times, how does it feel for you?
Yeah, I think it's exciting. I do remind myself that I'm going to have to prove myself again. Like nobody knows what I do and all of that. So yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge. The school that I'm going to is known for working hard and, having high expectations. So it'll be interesting to see like the new environment and how it plays out. But I'm pretty excited.
Now, are you looking forward to, you wrote a blog a couple of years ago called How to Meet New People when you're kind of new in town. Does that advice that you gave us nearly 10 years ago, does that still apply?
I think it does. One thing that I've noticed being here in Budapest that I feel is really different to what I said about being in Beirut was the local people are just very different here. So Lebanese people are very warm and friendly, and they want to invite you in. They want to take you places. So that's one thing that's a little bit different. The other thing is because in Lebanon, everyone is trilingual to some extent. They're going to be dominant in either French or Arabic, and then with English is another one. You can find a lot of events that cater to a multilingual population. So I could go be like, oh, there's this cool photography talk. I want to go to it. And it's going to be in multiple languages. Whereas I found that here in Budapest, I found some really cool activities that I would be interested in. Like they have a design week here, which seems really cool, but nothing is in English. And so it's hard to really participate. So that's kind of a difference. I'm feeling like Bangkok is a little bit more like kind of expat friendly and international than Budapest. So maybe it'll be a bit more like that, but that remains to be seen.
I love being the new teacher on the block. I mean, it's like a fresh start. Nobody knows who you are. You can show up and, just be a brand new you. Isn't that exciting? I can't wait. Again, I'm happy where I'm at, but when I start recruiting for my next school, I just get this feeling like, oh my God, I can't wait to be that new teacher, go through the onboarding process, prove myself maybe to some people, just a clean slate, and I sort of traveling so much in my whole life. I've been traveling around. I'm this rambling guy, but I can't wait. I'm excited for you. I'm not even going to Bangkok. I'm just excited for you. I've been there many times. I have some great connections for you. And if you ever go to Cambodia, that's what you need to do. Go for a weekend or something. I'll set you up. I have a tuk-tuk driver for you, right? A little taxi driver for you and everything. And that brings us into the next part of the show, Kent. You know what I'm going to talk about next? I told you before, Cambodia.
Police stories.
Police stories. Do you have a police story for us, Lindsay, from Budapest or from?
Nothing really good, but I will say that I was like terrified of police here pulling me over for quite a while because I had a situation with my parking permit here where my district decided that you couldn't park there if you didn't have an European passport. You couldn't register. And so to get around that, my landlord let me register my car under his business. But for some reason, when you register to business, they don't put a sticker on your license plate. They give you a paper for your glove box, which makes no sense because every time a cop would see me, they would not see the sticker. And so they would pull me over to want to see this paper. And I don't speak the language, so that was challenging. And the other thing was I was technically supposed to get a Hungarian driver's license after 6 months, but they make it impossible here, like so difficult. So I didn't have one. No one at our school had one, but it was kind of known, like,
roll the dice.
Be careful, roll the dice, but nobody did it. So that's what I did. But I was terrified of getting pulled over, and I kept getting pulled over. It'd be like on the way to school, and I would see those lights and be like, oh my God, not again. But basically what happened every time was they kind of like realized I don't speak Hungarian, they don't speak English, and just kind of like waved me on. They've since changed that. I also moved to a different district. So now I have the parking permit, so that doesn't happen anymore, thankfully. And I actually have a European passport now. Since 2018, I've been a dual citizen with Italy. So.
That's awesome.
Congratulations.
All right, here's my story. This is Cambodia, because talk about being terrified of police. When I first moved there, I got a moped, okay? Because their cars are just not worth getting there. It's like going through a river with a barge. So you get a moped and you can go anywhere, and the traffic is going both ways and everything. And the police don't have any, they're not armed, and they're not paid well at all. But it reminds me of other countries, but I was so afraid of being pulled over just because I didn't speak Khmer, Cambodian. And I was worried about it, because anytime you drive in a new country, we're all guests in new countries, or in our countries that we choose. We're guests there. So to drive there, it's sort of taking a big jump, right? One time I'm just on my bike and I get pulled over by this cop. He waves me over. He wasn't in a car or chasing me or anything. It's not like CHIPS, California Highway Patrol or anything. No, they're standing along the side of the road. And this guy waves me over and he goes, your blinker is broken. You must have blinker. And I'm like, the blinker works. Here's the right one, the left one, the double blinker, and he's going through this whole thing. He goes, you must pay a fine. And I'm like, oh God. So I handed him like a $5 US and that I carried around. It's either local currency or in dollars. And the dollar's more powerful. So I gave him the $5 and the guy sort of lets me go. And after that, I talked to a couple other teachers at school and they're like, Greg, they just don't get paid anything. So they pull you over and they make up something. Therefore, you have to stop. They want some kind of a bribe for lunch. And I was like, well, that's not fair. So they're not armed or anything. So I started playing. The longer I lived there, the more impatient I got. And I remember the last year I was living in there, I was at a stoplight and I turned the corner and sure enough, there are 5 policemen standing there and they see a white guy. And there's 5 policemen fanned out into the road to wave me over to give me a fine, right? And I'm like, no way. So I veered off into oncoming traffic, which is not abnormal in Cambodia because it goes every which way. And I pulled out and I zoomed past him and it flipped him the finger. I'm like, no way, I'm not doing it anymore. So I'm worried that if I go back to Cambodia, these 5 guys might recognize me and they say, hey, that's that guy that was flipping us off as he's going by on his bike. But I had nothing wrong. I have all my paperwork. I had proof of identity. I had proof of purchase. Everything was working on it. I was like, oh, come on. Anytime I saw a policeman, I just veered away off into oncoming traffic and risked my life to get away from these police officers because I don't want to pay and play their game. I'm like, no way. So you go there and I'll get you set up with a tuk-tuk driver because it's a wonderful place to go. You're going to love Bangkok so much. You land there and you say, give me 2 crickets and a SIM card, right? And you eat the crickets and you put the SIM card in your phone and you're all done. All set to go.
I don't know that that's the order of events for me, but.
I was just visiting Bangkok at the time.
I think it's the crickets before the SIM card is what she's telling us.
And talk about networking. When you're ready to scuba dive, if you go down to the islands, Koh Tao or Koh Samui, I'll set you up with a dive guide and a dive school that you can go to. I have a good friend. I lived there for about 2 summers in Koh Tao. So it's like a second place for me.
That's never been an interest of mine. I've never tried it. The thought of putting on all that gear, and I don't like fish. I don't.
Well, it's not. This is not a scuba dive. It's not. Kent's laughing so hard. It's not a. It's not a scuba diving podcast. You don't have to. I'm just saying, There's a lot of cool things to do in Thailand. You're gonna love it.
No, but I have thought about this because I see the trips people go on, and the overall package of the trip seems nice, but just I don't know, not being able to breathe properly. It's just. I should probably try it before I knock it, but I'm not super interested at the moment.
I might just go for the free cruise, the water, the food. That's all I need. I don't need to go under the water. I'm happy on the water. Lindsay, if I'm not mistaken, you wrote in a blog that you visited Thailand before you applied for a job there, I believe. And you said, I can see myself living here. What is it that you saw when you visited Thailand?
Kent, you are such a good interviewer. Done all your research.
What about me? What about me? I'm pretty good too.
You just invited us to tell your stories.
You're right. He did research you quite a bit. So go ahead.
So I've been twice. The first time I went was on sort of an 8-week backpacking tour around Southeast Asia. And I loved it then. I always hear people say you either love Bangkok straight away or you don't. And I don't know why I did. I kind of liked that mix of old and new and traditional and like big city. As I'm a city person, like kind of smaller, more intimate areas of the city. So I kind of liked that. And when I was visiting that time, I actually stayed in a hotel on the same street as the school that I'm going to work at now. Kind of like walked around. I don't know. I loved the feel of it. It's totally different to where I am now in Europe, but I guess the feeling, like the area seemed like it had a mix of things that were modern conveniences, but more like exotic, let's say, things that I'm not used to. I love the food. I love the people. It'll be nice to be in, I guess what they call the land of smiles, as opposed to, I'm not going to say, but people are not here.
That's okay. That's okay. I get that.
The land of Pad Thai. I think you were going to say the land of Pad Thai, right?
Yes, I love Pad Thai.
All right, Kent, you got more questions from your research? Go ahead.
Well, I did have one question for you, but this is not, see, the timeline is off a little bit here. You know, you started blogging. You started talking about your travels and teaching in, I think, 2010 when you first started your venture in Beirut. Were you a writer and a blogger, and you call yourself an introvert, but were you a writer and a blogger before that? Did you have a particular interest in telling the world your story?
I did have a blog prior to that, which is not linked up with it, when I was teaching in New York. It was New York Teacher Blog. It's probably still out there somewhere. And I think I started just because, like I was saying before, like when I was researching the job fairs and finding these blog posts, when I was starting Teach for America, like I found people sharing their stories on blogs. And that's how I kind of knew when I started Teach for America, what I was getting into, what the recruitment process was going to be like when I started international teaching. And so I just kind of felt like, hey, I want to share my story with people who might be looking for the same information. But also it's kind of like a record of, you know, things that I've done. And I wish that I had written more along the way. Sometimes I think I don't have anything to write about, which I probably do, but I like being able to look back and kind of remember that. I also did a photo project for many years. Was a photo a day back before people took selfies. I was out in the streets of New York taking selfies and people looking at you like you're crazy, like setting up your camera somewhere. And then there would always be a long caption that went with it. So I kind of had like a journal of every day of the year for several years, kind of to look back on. So I kind of keep it for myself in memories, you know, and I saw, Greg, you shared with me your newsletters and the blog thing. And I thought that was so cool. I've never seen that format before, by the way. And I loved your creativity with the newsletters and how you kind of like got so creative with the format and everything. But I kind of loved how you were sharing just like little details. It's almost like a yearbook when you look back at it, like you can remember like who you worked with and what everything was like. And I just think it's really cool to be able to look back on those things and keep those memories.
Yeah, it's sort of like, it's like a diary, and it's grown more because I teach technology and I've gotten away from homeroom more. So I do dabble with lots of different kinds of things. I did a website instead of a blog, and I think it's because before blogs even came out, or when they had blogs, it was still a website for me. And it was just a choice because I loved going on yours too, because I can make so many parallels between what you do and following through your blog. It's exciting to go back and see what the early times were like, right?
Yeah.
And there's so many parallels between what we do. And that's why I love job fairs. That's why I love doing this podcast and meeting people. You're cut from the same cloth that Kent and I are. Unfortunately, I think Kent and I would say like, oh my God. But we really, speaking for both of us, we love talking to other people in other countries and hearing about your experience from first, like right straight from your experience, what it's like. And that's what other people listening to this podcast can learn from us, what it's like to live overseas. When you started your blog, who's your audience?
I think I just had it. I wasn't, like you said, just writing it like only my friends and family are going to see this. Like I started my blog kind of like in the height of blogs being a thing and being popular. So I had this idea that, people were going to read it. So I think that's another reason why sometimes I'm like, what is like the voice of what I'm saying? Like, am I doing just like, here's my day today? Like today I did this and, all these little details, or am I writing like articles that people are going to be more interested in? So I I did have this idea that people would be reading it. When I lived in Beirut, there was a very close community of people who were on Twitter, and we would get together for tweet ups, and a lot of them had blogs. So when I lived in Lebanon, I did have like a big readership of Lebanese people. And if you look back on my blog, you can see that I have a lot more comments on each post from back then, because people were really involved with like having these conversations in this community. And now, because I'm not that like consistent with the posting, like sometimes it'll be like nobody reads a post or like 5 people do, but I don't care. It's still for me. And, someday somebody's going to be searching for that information and they might be interested.
When I started mine, I had a little bit different idea. It was just, instead of sending out a mass email, I wanted my mom and dad to know I wasn't going to die, because when your parents thought you're going to go overseas, they're like, wow, that's her. It sounds like something. My parents are like, he's going to die. My mom said that. You're going to die. You're going to Honduras. And my dad's like, there's great diving. I ended up adding the second half of my book was just experiences that I drew from those newsletters. Those newsletters that I sent home were just like a diary for me. And like you say, I write it more for myself now than I write for other people. And if they want to jump on there, of course they can. If they want to read a book, of course they can. How do our listeners get in touch with you or reach out and see what you've written?
Yeah, you can put it in the notes, but my blog is thepresentperfect.wordpress.com. And then I have 2 Twitter accounts. One, Miss M Teaches L's, that's like where I post about, stuff about teaching and work. And then my other ones, maybe not so interesting for other people to follow, but it's mostly like me following other interests that I have, politics and different like urban design and just different random interests that I have. I follow everything else over there.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah. Go ahead.
What is your next creative project going to be? If our listeners haven't tuned into this yet, one of the nice things that I find about international teachers is they've always got something creative going on. And you've got so much going on, from languages to blogs to projects. Do you have a new project in mind for the future?
I haven't thought about it yet, but now that you're asking, it could be a cool thing to do another photo a day project, like starting from the day I arrive in Bangkok. Like that could be a cool thing. Photo a day project is a big commitment, but it is really cool to have that every single day, photo to look back on and the stories that go with it. That could be.
And now it's just whip out your phone instead of take out a camera and just zoom, bam, you've got photos and you go back. It's posting was the tough one, right?
Yeah, back in the day, I always used my DSLR. So you did have to download them and edit them and do that. Now with the phone, it's easier, but you don't always have your professional camera because you're just relying on the phone. But it does make
that's really cool that she's going to do something new like that. I think I'm going to take up knitting. What are you going to do, Kent? Oh, Kent's already doing so many things. He's into so many different abstract things that I can't even begin to. Like,
I'm giving up knitting since I'm moving to Bangkok.
I see. The cats thank you. Yeah. Kent, any words, any comments on that one?
No, I'm going to say no comment on that one.
All right, Lindsay, we are close to the end here. I was wondering if you had any any advice for people that are listening to our podcast? We have new teachers out there in the States. We have teachers already overseas.
Well, if you're not already doing it, I just recommend everybody to do it. I hear all about, experiences people are having back in the States and, what it's like teaching there. And, if more people could know there's another world out there that you can do what you love in a better environment, could be great for everybody.
I think it's fantastic. Have you helped convince people? Do you have anyone that you know that you've talked to them and they've made the leap into the international world of teaching?
Yeah, actually, a guy who I worked with in Brooklyn, which was when I was about to leave to go teach abroad, I think he stayed one more year and then he did the same. And I think he's been out there for a while now. So that's kind of cool.
Wow, I don't think I've influenced anybody to go overseas. I think they don't go overseas because I'm over here somewhere. They're like, no, don't go. I'm going to run into Greg or something.
The year that I was in the States between Beirut and Budapest, I was subbing in public schools in Illinois. And I would just be sitting in the teacher's room during, lunch breaks or whatever. And telling people like where I'd come from and what I was doing. And I kept trying to always like talk up this idea of teaching abroad to these teachers who were like very sad in these public schools that I was working in. And I honestly don't know if I convinced anybody, but that was the moment where I had the idea. I know, Greg, you saw this on my blog. I have a series of international educator interviews. And so I was like, I should start collecting stories of other people and put them on my blog to share. So that was kind of where the idea came from
I hope you continue that. And I'd be willing to go on there too. Of course, people have heard me on this podcast way too much, but I love that idea that you put that on your blog because the teacher interviews were what I jumped right to. I want to know what other people are doing overseas, right? Where they are and where they've been. In fact, I hope at some point in my life, I want to make an app. I think you'd like this too, Lindsay. An app that keeps track of just international teachers, where they've taught and where they've gone over the years, not in like great detail, but just the name of the school to match with sort of like a map, like, Facebook means to do. But I'm sure Facebook can sort of do this for us with their algorithms. But wouldn't it be cool to know that Kent went from, just you run into Kent, you get to know who he is, and you find out he went from Yemen to here, and I went from here to here to here, and Lindsay went from Budapest from Beirut. I can't think of Beirut to Budapest to Thailand. I mean, and
then it starts becoming this web of connections where you met up with people. And
when other people get into this, like we are now, you're going to find a person that's, 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon away from you, and they taught with somebody that taught with somebody that taught with somebody in some other country, and you're like, whoa, I didn't even know you guys knew each other.
Yeah, and you know who to ask advice to. Actually, Greg, I wanted to ask you when I found out that you worked in Lugano, because I had always had that as kind of a place that maybe I would want to work because, it's got the Italian thing going on. When I looked into it a bit more, I was like, oh, I don't know, maybe I couldn't tell if it was more of a traditional school than I'm used to now. And so like I would ask you for,
right. And I guess my only comment would be to remain really positive is it's a beautiful school. I like the elementary part of it. I was also in the middle school as a dorm parent. It's a very traditional school, like you said. It's an American school where you couldn't wear blue jeans. I was like, wait a minute, I'm American. Why can't I wear blue jeans at school? But I loved my experience there. I would say anybody should go and teach there for a while and find out for themselves. It is a gorgeous place. It's the most beautiful place in the whole world that I would ever want to live. And you're right. That kind of a conversation starts by just knowing that somebody's been there, because you want to get it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. If anybody that was interested in going to any of the schools I've been to, I could give them a good, the bad, and the ugly of my experience that might, the school might have changed, but I can tell you some basics. And living there, that living experience. I could ask him about Yemen, ask Kent about Yemen. He loves Yemen, just like you loved Budapest. And Beirut has changed so much, but you could give us an idea of what it was like back then. That web, that connection is a goal that I have in my life. And maybe I'll make it come to fruition, maybe not. But meeting people like you and having a great conversation like this is what it's all about. And I really thank you for being on our show, because we're coming up on our hour spot here. And Kent, any final words to say to Lindsay?
Only thank you so much, Lindsay. It's been a pleasure chatting with you today.
Thank
I
you.
agree. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun, and we'll hopefully get you on the show again. We look forward to keeping track of your blog, and I want to see some more of those interviews on your blog, okay, with
Coming
other
soon.
teachers. Good. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Yeah, bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
And that's the show. Well, you don't have to hang up if you don't want to.